You are listening to The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards.
Hello, this is Matthew Giles.
And I'm Cindy Parakill.
Standards. Well, they affect all of us, every day, everywhere. By defining good practice, they help people, organisations, the economy and society do things better.
And every year, standards-making bodies around the world publish thousands of them for all sorts of things. For some of the big stuff that affects all our lives, like ISO 22000, an international standard that helps food producers and suppliers around the world manage risks and keep our food safe.
And it's not just the big stuff, it's the small stuff too. There's a standard for pen caps, which reduces the risk of asphyxiation if children accidentally swallow pen caps. Amazing, really.
And then there's everything in between, from standards that help organizations protect customer data and strengthen cybersecurity, to those that guide the safe and effective use of AI in medical devices, to those that ensure the cables that charge our smartphones work reliably.
In fact, if you viewed the artwork for this podcast episode or taken a photo on your smartphone today, you've likely relied on JPEGs, all made possible by the standard ISO IEC 10918 that defines how these images are compressed and displayed worldwide.
And standards like these are made by standards makers. Tens of thousands of people from around the world who get together to agree good practice to the way things are made and done, all helping to make life easier, safer, and more enjoyable.
Now, this episode of The Standards Show is my conversation with one of those standards makers, Rowshi Hussain. Rowshi is a geo-environmental engineer at Cundall, a global engineering consultancy that provides sustainable design and engineering services for buildings and infrastructure projects. She is a standards maker in the field of personal protective equipment, or PPE, and an award-winning one too, having won a Young Professional Impact Award at the BSI Impact Awards 2026. I spoke to Rowshi about why she is a standards maker, the impact it's had on her career, her employer, and her advice to anyone looking to get involved in standards. I started by asking Rowshi to tell me about her career so far.
So I started studying geology at university, and then lockdown happened because of COVID, and it took me a little bit of time of trying to get into a career. Originally I thought I'd get into oil and gas because geology, and then I accidentally got a job in engineering, and I say accidentally because I didn't have a background in engineering and I fell in love with it. And so here I am now as a geo-environmental engineer. So I started as a graduate. I spent a lot of my time out on site, and I shortly progressed through my career. And I'm now just under 5 years that I've been in industry, and I've recently become chartered with the Geological Society.
That's very nice. I love the way you accidentally fell into engineering there. That's nice. And tell us more about this current job that you have. What does it involve on the day-to-day?
So I'm a geo-environmental engineer, so I work in ground engineering specifically. That means I pretty much answer two questions. That is, how clean or dirty is the ground, and how strong and weak is the ground? And this is to help structural and civil engineers kind of figure out the risk of the ground to foundations and infrastructure to proposed developments. And that could be anything from a house to a skyscraper.
And in terms of standards then, Rowshi, how important are standards generally to your job?
So I tend to use them daily for a lot of technical guidance. So that could be something from scoping a ground investigation and determining my sampling and testing. So that would be using BS 10175 for investigating contaminated land, to using BS 5930 for ground investigations. So it really is quite important from a technical perspective. But I think recently there's been a shift in, prioritizing the welfare of the workforce by implementing the BS guidances for menopause or for suicide in the workplace, and now the inclusive PPE. guidance document.
Yes, we're going to get on to that. So obviously that standards are important for you on the sort of the day-to-day work that you're doing. Obviously you mentioned there some other standards that are being used sort of social impact and organisations using them in all sorts of really positive ways. Tell me about, I want to get into your standards journey, but tell me first, what standards are you involved with? What standards do you make?
So I was on the drafting panel for BS 30417, the provision of inclusive PPE. And ever since that guidance has come out, I've been an active member in advocating and promoting that guidance within my own industry and outside.
And tell us why is that standard so important?
It's really important because it's personal for me. So when I did start as a graduate, I really suffered from ill-fitting PPE. And for reference, I'm 4'11", so I'm definitely below average height. And I was pretty much provided one size fits all PPE. So I was given an extra small jacket that just was way too big for me. It meant that my sleeves were covering and going beyond my hands, which meant that I didn't have the safe grip that a normal person would have if I was to fall over. I was constantly rolling up my sleeves. I was rolling up my trousers, both at my hips and at like the bottom of my feet, which was quite annoying because I was constantly adjusting my PPE. It made things really difficult in terms of like trying to walk, and because I was trying to balance a hard hat on my head, trying to write using a pen because my gloves were too big. And then it takes a mental toll because, I looked like I didn't belong. I was basically showing up on site looking like I was wearing my dad's jacket, and everyone would make those comments. And over time, they started to get to me. And so when I did speak up about it, either I was given a no because either a product wasn't available on the market or there just wasn't enough people that they were able to financially, account for an additional item of PPE. And I didn't stop there. I kept bringing it up. And then I realized that actually my experience was a lot more relatable to a lot more people in the industry, especially for females. So I continued being an advocate for it. And then I saw that the BSI were looking to draft this guidance. So I joined the committee, and here we are.
Just on that, before I get on to you joining the committee, tell us a bit more about how that made you feel. Young female engineer. How did it make you feel with the PPE not fitting for you? How did that make you feel?
A lot of the times I really I felt like I didn't belong. I felt, even though I knew I was so competent at undertaking my role, people wouldn't take me seriously. They'd laugh at me. Sometimes, they'd think I was a child on site, or they'd think I was waiting for my dad, even though, I was there to supervise and lead the ground investigations, which is what I do on a lot of construction sites. But also, it takes a mental toll, but you also are subjected to a lot of health and safety issues, as well as injuries such as, I'd get headaches from wearing my hard hat, or my ankles would start feeling a bit funny because I was trying to overcompensate in every step I was taking. So they really do get to you, and it's just almost like trying to find that sense of belonging and having that inner battle within myself that actually I am just as good and I do belong in the job I'm in.
Now, obviously, you've been involved in developing the inclusive PPE standard. I want to talk about your standards journey. You started to say there about how it began, but take us back to the beginning. How and when did your standards journey start?
So, I think initially I obviously applied. I did have a lot of hesitation. I thought, what do I know about PPE? What do I even know about, writing a guidance or a standard? Prior to me even applying, I thought it was BSI staff that would write standards. I didn't realize it was volunteers. So when I was fortunate enough to actually join the committee, you are present, and my committees were all virtual. So you're within a network of people from all parts of life. So in my committee, it was manufacturers, suppliers of PPE, you had governmental organizations, you had end users, all the way to employers. And everyone was from different industries. So you had people from healthcare, you had people from construction, you had people from medical fields, from horse riding, all that you wouldn't think would require PPE, but they did. And it really gave me a different perspective. It was a safe environment where everyone was able to share their experience, share their thoughts. And in doing so, through several sessions, we were able to kind of create this guidance that we thought was relatable and relevant for a lot of industries.
Tell us about that experience of sort of developing the standard there, because you said earlier that you didn't realise you could get involved and volunteer for this sort of thing. How did it make you feel when you were sitting round the table having those conversations?
At first, I was quite nervous because I definitely was early careers. I also had those doubts of, what do I know? I only wear PPE and I just want trousers that fit me. But actually, me being an end user was actually so vital to this guidance. And one of the things I did personally was actually stress, like, keeping the end user at the heart of this process is really important and integral in order for us to get it right. And I remember at the start being quite shy, almost nervous to kind of give my opinion. But I was really fortunate that the chair of my committee and our standards manager were so inviting and would give everyone a fair chance, that I found my voice and I found that confidence to actually feel like whatever I said, regardless, it mattered. And I think that really was the driving point for me, where I started openly sharing my experiences. I mean, there were times where we had these committee meetings and I was out on site. So I was usually in a car or a cabin in my PPE, wearing my high vis, whether it was raining, whether it was sunny, and they could actually see firsthand, actually, this is PPE for me. This is my reality. This is why this is so important. And I think it really gave them an insight into how important being an end user was. And actually, having all those doubts and being in early careers, it doesn't matter. Everyone has something to add to it, and it's really important.
You were a live case study as the standard was being developed there. Rowshi, you've mentioned some of the maybe the reasons why you got involved, but sort of boil it down for me. What were your main motivations here for getting involved in standards?
I think it was making an impact. I stand from a point of view that I want to make sure that the future generation don't face the same problems and challenges that I have. I also want to make my industry look attractive to others. And I think these were key drivers for me.
So obviously you've been involved in this groundbreaking standard, Rowshi. I just think, will your motivations be the same for staying involved in standards?
Yes, 100%. I think seeing the impact that writing the BS 30417 has had, I definitely want to continue. For me, it's been such a big change in my career. It's provided me with so many incredible opportunities, but also just seeing that impact, like, on a day-to-day basis, it shows you how important it is to be involved with standards. So I'd love to get involved in maybe looking at more of a technical standpoint of getting involved, because I think that would be quite fun to do.
Tell us more about the career angle. What's been the impact of being a standards maker had on your career?
It's definitely increased my skill set. For example, writing standards is completely different to writing reports or doing anything, because there's a certain style. You have to create your own definitions. So it really makes you think outside the box. But also the opportunities. For example, it's given me public speaking opportunities where I was able to participate in loads of public panels. And this really helped my chartership process and application, because it really set me apart. And it gave me a newfound confidence. And as well as working within a committee, you're working with different people that you don't necessarily see or work with on a day-to-day. So you really have to become a really good listener and actually learn to work with others, even though you might not necessarily agree with them.
How about your employer here, Rowshi, as well? You've mentioned there about the impact on yourself and on your sort of professional development. What do your employers think about you being a standards maker?
Well, I think it's been very positive. They celebrate that I have been involved in standards. They've put me up for several awards, which is amazing. But also, I think internally within, for example, BS 30417, I've taken that back to my employer, my organisation. I've said we should really look at this. And I also recommend other standards just from being involved, which they're very grateful for. So it's almost having insight within.
And what sort of other standards have you been mentioning to your employer?
So the menopause guidance and suicide in the workplace, I think that's something that's really, really important. So that's something I've taken forward, as well as providing the inclusive PPE to the health and safety reps and kind of looking at it from an auditing perspective of how they can be better.
Now, Rowshi, you're an early career professional and you're relatively early in your standards journey, but what's been your proudest standards making moment so far?
I think it's got to be two things.
I'll let you have two.
Yeah. One being my name being mentioned in the House of Commons by MP Kirsty Sullivan when she announced her 10-minute bill, which was to really implement the importance of inclusive PPE. That was something I never anticipated in a million years to ever happen, but to hear my name, it just really showed how important it is to be passionate about something and to actually work on it and don't stop. Because, you just don't know what's ever going to come your way. So I was quite proud of that. I also didn't expect it. And then I guess the second one was getting the BSI Young Impact Award for my works promoting the guidance. I think that really homes in how much of a role model I have been and that my hard work is being appreciated. So, I think those two are probably up there for me.
Well, many congratulations on both of those things. In terms of what's next then for you, Rowshi, what's next for you in your standards journey? Where do you go next?
I think I'm going to continue pushing and driving change in inclusive PPE. Pretty much, I don't really want to have to keep using the word inclusive in front of it. I want it to be pretty much be normalized that when we say PPE, it's inclusive for everybody, regardless. I'm going to look at potentially getting involved in other standards, maybe a technical standard, and then keeping connected with the Young Professionals Network and seeing what opportunities arise from that.
And what advice then would you give to anyone else considering getting involved in standards?
I would say do it. Don't hesitate because you just don't know the legacy you will leave behind. I pretty much believe a standard will outlive me, so it's likely to outlive you. And you get so much growth for both your development. It basically was the driver for my chartership, which set me apart, and it was such an easy win. And you can find connections in industry, which is amazing to do so because you just never know in your career when you might need to reach out to someone. So I say do it, get involved.
Now, like Rowshi, you too might want to be part of the standards community, sharing your expertise to shape standards for personal protective equipment. Or maybe you want to create smarter transport solutions or make a difference in the field of baby feeding products or maybe cybersecurity. It doesn't matter. Whatever your thing, get involved in standards. We welcome applicants from all fields, backgrounds and career stages. Our goal is simple: to have a balance of perspectives around the table. So start that standards journey now. Details of how to do so are in the show notes. And the show notes are also where you can find details of our socials and all the other ways to get in touch with us here on The Standard Show.
You have been listening to an episode of The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.